this was definitely the best game I've played in Rise of Nations. I started off as Malta, made an electronic factory right away so I could sell before anyone else in the server, and used all my manpower on infantry so I could instantly expand into Tunisia. So first I went to static so my troops wouldn't get destroyed by AI. Once they were ready, I sent them to Tunisia. But of course, I somehow messed up. Instead of the troops landing and then taking the city, they took the city first. So all of Tunisia's troops rushed into that city, and I had to move them into another one and land there, which was annoying, but it wasn't too bad. And then I defeated all of their troops and took over Tunisia easily. Now from Tunisia, I had to wait until it cooled down so I can make phosphate and of course tanks from a square city. But I also had like no manpower. So since Pakistan was begging for money in chat so he could defeat AI India, I told him I'd give him some money for manpower. But he joined late, so he had a new ruler timer, and I had to trust him and hope that he was going to give me that manpower. While I was waiting to see if Pakistan was going to give me the manpower, I started making tanks and getting ready to attack Algeria and Morocco since both of them were AI and good land to expand in. But for some reason, Algeria became a player and just fight on me. Like, I don't know why someone would join a game late, choose a weak country, and attack me. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I found his house, and even though I had tanks in Algeria, I didn't want to push them out because they were mount specializing. But since his troops kept going into mine, they stopped specializing, so I decided I was just going to recapture my cities with the tanks that I had and then push into him. While I was retaking my cities after Algeria's horrible attack, Pakistan gave me manpower like he said he would, and I was saved. I used his manpower instantly to make more tanks, and honestly, there was no hope for Algeria. One of the easiest wars I've won in Rise of Nations. After I finished taking over Algeria, I decided to go for Morocco next, who was a player, but I honestly had no idea what he was doing. When I declared, I went slowly through his cities because I thought he was going to push into my tanks with his huge troop stack, but for some reason, he just did nothing. I don't know if he went AFK or not, but I took over his capital and then flanked his troops and won. And that was another easy war and more land for me. Now, honestly, after I took over Morocco, I didn't really know who to go for next. France was in a huge war with Switzerland and Romania, so I didn't know if I should join one of the sides or go for both of them, but I eventually decided to go for Spain, who was glazing France, but wasn't even allied to him. So I waited until I got enough manpower to go for him, and I used my tanks from before, but I also made a lot of infantry, so there wouldn't be any chance that I lost the war. I sent my tanks auto-capture and my infantry up to his capital. Spain wasn't a bad player. He had a bunch of artillery supporting his troops on his capital, but either way, I was able to take it over. And I don't know when this guy got some random land in Africa and the UK, but of course he had it, so it took me even longer to just take him over. I know this isn't about me, but I have no idea how Romania wasn't taken over here. France had Russia join him in the war, and then Russia was falling apart and had like no money, so he transferred all of Romania to France. And I'm like 99% sure that Romania could have gotten force peace here. So I have no idea why France didn't just force peace them, because eventually Romania started to retake his lands, and Turkey joined the war against France and took him over. I mean, this guy had so many chances to take over Romania and then put all of his focus on Switzerland, but for some reason, he just didn't try and get the force peace. So now, I honestly wanted to go for Romania and destroy his ego, since he thought he was so good after France lost. I sent a bunch of infantry up near Romania so I could get ready to attack them, but Turkey saw all my troops near his lands and sent me an ally request. I accepted because I thought that I could just attack Romania through Turkey, but I didn't realize that Turkey and Romania were allied. I thought it was just Turkey and Switzerland allied since France's war was on Switzerland. But I was probably just gonna unally Turkey to get the truce and then attack Romania because I didn't want to fight 2v1 without knowing how good they were first. But of course, after I already made so much infantry, I trained them up and got ready to attack. They eventually both left the game because I had to go AFK for like 5 minutes. So that was like my whole plan gone. I guess the US also took this time to help take over France so he could get land in Europe. So now my plan was to take over both Romania and Turkey's lands and get ready to attack the US first. So I used the troops I already had to start taking over their lands, and for some reason, Turkey never chose France. So I had to also declare on France so I could actually get the cities, and then of course he started breaking apart. And it was annoying, but whatever, I could deal with it. I then also decided to switch to mass attack, because if you watch my last video, you know how OP it is late game. So I made some more troops so I could take them over quicker, but it wasn't long till I realized that the US was sending an aircraft carrier with a bunch of troops up near me, so I knew that he was going to attack. The worst thing wasn't the US attacking, it was when he did. I was so close to finishing the war with Romania and Turkey right before he declared and started to push into my lands. Now, when I checked his push, I thought he only had an aircraft carrier and infantry coming near me. So I made destroyers and submarines to try and easily stop it, but I was wrong. He had like 50 destroyers along with some battleships, so my navy got absolutely cooked. But I didn't lose yet. He originally tried landing all his troops at once in the same place, but since I was on mast, I was easily able to spam more troops and stop all of his landing attempts. But he ended up just auto-capturing, which was honestly the best thing he could do. So, you guys saw this in the intro, but I'll be honest, it wasn't all that bad, at least at the start. I did go into debt, but that was because of all my spendings, so I got rid of them and started selling more to my internal market. And also I had 7.5 million troops ready to take over the cities that he took over, which was basically nothing, and then push into his lands. But that wasn't his only attack. After I quickly got my cities back after his first attack, he set another one in the same area, but once again, I made more infantry and easily got all my land back. There wasn't really a good way for him to push into me because I was easily able to defend against all of his ground attacks, and I also finally pieced Romania. Since he knew that he couldn't really do any damage to me from his attacks on random cities, he sent his 40 destroyers to weaken the troops on my capital. So I made a bunch of artillery all over Tunisia, but it wasn't even close to being strong enough to defeat his destroyers. So I had to get the proper tech and try to beat them with my own navy. He then finally decided to push into my capital with not too many troops, but since his destroyers were already weakening the infantry I had on my capital, I had to spam a bunch of infantry, and since my capital was on an island, he wasn't able to break through. I also knew that auto-capturing wasn't going to be enough, so I made over 2 million troops and started to sail them next to the US, because I was going to try to take his capital or a lot of his land. I also made enough destroyers to defeat his huge stack since I got a navy leader and a lot of destroyer tech. Now, since I had a lot of troops in the water, I went into a huge deficit, and money was honestly a huge problem for me in this war because my internal market just wasn't giving me enough income. And even worse was that the US found out that I was sending troops to his mainland and stopped me with his navy. So I decided to auto-capture from there. But only some of my troops landed, and he stopped them with his own 2 million stack. And since I was on mast, my troops were already worse, and his stack had more infantry than mine, so that first attack didn't work. I tried again, but this time I wanted to land through Canada and have my troops land there and then attack. But this was finally what put me into debt, so I had to find someone to ask for money. I ended up asking Canada, who I thought was definitely going to say no since he was in the US's faction, but he ended up sending me $2.5 billion, which honestly saved me from losing this war. And I'll be honest, he sent me more money throughout the war, and without it, I would have lost. And this attack was finally the end of the US. I was able to auto-capture a little, and then I took over his capital. And I was so happy since I thought I had won, but I was wrong. He took back his cities, including his capital, so we were still going to be fighting for a while. And I also noticed that he tried chipping down my infantry with bombers, and that only meant one thing. He was going to start mass bombing me since everything else wasn't working. I started making some anti-air and fighters, but there's honestly no good way to stop bombings, so I fortified all my cities and tried to make me survive for a little bit longer. And then I realized that the US had so much more land than I thought. He had all of Brazil, half of Africa, and Russia, and he had so much more land and population than me, but I was still alive because I was on mass attack. And I mean, no one can say that mass attack is not the best doctrine late game. The US grouped all of his bombers in one area, so I tried to stop them with the fighters that I made. And since I maxed out fighter doctrine, my small amount of fighters were able to kill his bombers easily. And I also made over 20 million troops now. And I did almost go into debt, but Canada saved me, so I was finally in a good position now. Since my troops were going to take over his land in Brazil, and I already had all of Russia and almost all of his land in Africa. We both knew that his time was almost up. I now sent another huge attack, but this time with my destroyers defending my infantry. And since I was so ahead in tech, all of his attempts to kill my destroyers with his navy failed, no matter if he used battleships or the double amount of destroyers that I had. My destroyers were just too strong, and I finally landed on the US, even though it took a very long time, and took over his capital. And I thought it was finally over, but this was when Canada decided to join. Canada joined the war against me, and like you guys saw in the intro, he sent 20 nukes to me, which brought my war exhaustion up like crazy, and I honestly thought that I was going to break apart. My stability was crashing down, and I had to get anything that would bring it up. And I also went into debt, but I was saved by an IMF, which gave me $16 billion. And oh my God, you guys have no idea how much I love IMFs. Genuinely, without it, this video wouldn't be out because I could have like been in a crazy amount of debt and broken apart. But somehow I was able to survive the nukes. And then I decided I wasn't gonna let that slide. I sent my infantry that I used to take over the US to take over Canada's capital, which I was able to take it over easily. But honestly, I still don't know how to peace in factions, and Mexico was also in the faction, and I just wanted the US's land so I could form the European Union. So I left Canada alone and auto-captured the US until I finally took over all his land. After I finally took over the US, I started to take over all of the remaining European countries' land so I could form the European Union as Malta, which was my goal for the video, but I ended up having to kill the US, which really made this game way more fun. Also, let me know if you guys like this intro style, and make sure you guys watch this video and like and subscribe so I could keep making videos like this.